So with that, can we move to you, Michael? Would that feel okay?
Yeah, great.
Awesome.
So when I was thinking about, when I was preparing for this and I was thinking about the idea of the yes and the no, it felt very black and white to me. And I don't know about anybody else, but my life experience is normally more like shades of grey than black and white. And particularly when we think about consent as well, often it tends to get framed in terms of a yes or a no. And for me, what that brings up is the idea of permission. So we give permission with a yes, or we take permission away with the no. So that's often how it tends to get framed. With my work with the wheel of consent, I've my definition of consent has kind of expanded a little bit to focus more on agreements. So for me, consent is not just about one person saying yes or saying no, the permission aspect of it, but it's also the agreement that gets made between people about what will or what won't happen. And an agreement is can be made up of lots of different elements. So it might be about the location something's happening in all the time, or how many people are involved. And it's more nuanced than just a yes or a simple yes or a no. So when we start making agreements, we're moving from the binary of the yes or the no, more towards the want or the willing. And so I wanted to talk a little bit more about the idea of want and willing in this context. So in most exchanges or interactions, there's somebody who's putting their desire or their want first, and there's somebody else who's putting their desire or their want aside for the benefit of somebody else. So wanting is when you put your desire first, and willing is when you put your desire aside temporarily. And of course, there's also not willing as well. And because life has conditioned us in so many ways to go along with stuff and put up with stuff and endure stuff, it's often our willingness that gets pushed to the edge or overridden, and we often override it ourselves. So this impacts our ability to look after our limits and our boundaries, and to be able to communicate or to feel a no in some form. So although it's really important to be able to feel and say no, I often find when I'm working that it's the understanding of how willingness feels in our body that can help us to move towards being able to feel and speak our no, and to understand what kind of no it actually is. So a lot of my work, I work with what I call the scale of willingness. So on the one end, there's a hard no, absolutely not, never under any circumstances. On the other end of the spectrum, I'm totally willing, really up for it, 100% enthusiastically willing. And it's worth, you might be kind of thinking, well, what's the difference between that and a want? So a want is something that originates within myself. It's a desire that originates in myself. And when the desire is originating in somebody else, I may be really super willing to be involved in that, but the desire is coming from somebody else. And so I encourage people when I'm working with them, rather than simply defining their impulses as a yes or a no, but to follow a couple of steps and dig a little bit deeper into what's happening for them. So when there's an impulse for something, it might be touch or an impulse or an action or a request coming towards you, to ask, is this something I want for myself, or is this something that I'm willing for to benefit somebody else? And if I'm willing, where am I on that willingness scale? Am I really as willing as I'm saying I am? Because I might be falling into patterns with that. If I'm not willing, or not very willing, what might need to change in order for me to become more willing? And it might be that there's nothing that could change and I'm not going to be more willing. But there are things like, I might not be willing right now, but I might be willing in a couple of hours, or I might not be willing with you, but I might be willing with somebody else. So I can start to become aware of those nuances, and that helps me to move beyond maybe that immediate contraction that might come with a feeling of just saying no. And I can start communicating around it and start to move towards a more expanded agreement that might incorporate elements of yes and no, and bringing that into a much more kind of conscious interaction with the other person.